So if you were to just put on a pair of standard, everyday headphones right now.
Yeah, just your regular earbuds or whatever.
Right, exactly. And if you close your eyes and listen to this very specifically engineered audio file, I could totally trick your brain into believing a completely terrifying reality.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I could make you hear, with this undeniable clarity, the sound of someone walking up right behind you.
Just footsteps right on the back of your neck.
Yeah. You would hear the floorboards creaking, the rustle of their clothing, and then you'd hear them whisper from what feels like, I don't know, an inch away from you.
Which is incredibly jarring.
Your heart rate would instantly spike. You would physically spin around to look behind you because you'd fully expect someone to be standing right there.
But obviously the room is completely empty.
Exactly. The room is empty. And the crazy thing is, I don't need any magic to do this. I don't need to put you in some expensive haunted house. I really just need a handful of mathematical equations that know exactly how to hack the folds of your outer ear.
It is pure math.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are exploring this manual that honestly completely deconstructs how our brains process reality through sound.
It's a fascinating read.
We've got this dense, really mind-bending technical and historical text from France. It's called Le son multicanal de la production à la diffusion du son 5.1 3D et binaural.
Which, for those of us who aren't fluent in French, basically translates to multi-channel sound, from production to diffusion of 5.1 3D and binaural sound.
Right, and it was written by Bergame Perriot, Jean-Luc Aul, and Patrick Thévenot.
And, it is just a remarkable piece of literature because it treats audio not just as, like, a dry engineering problem, but really as a psychological playground.
Yes.
It doesn't just give you a list of speaker specs. It actually delves deep into the raw mechanics of human perception. It traces our whole, our obsession with acoustic space.
Which goes back way further than I thought.
Oh, way further. It documents how we basically manipulate sound waves to create these entirely synthetic environments that our physical brains just accept as totally real.
So our mission today is to take you, the listener, on a journey through this hidden universe of spatial audio. We're going to explore the whole evolutionary timeline.
From the very beginning.
Yeah, from staring at a single tinny mono speaker to sitting quietly in the corner of a room, all the way to engineering these staggering 22.2 channel immersive soundscapes.
Soundscapes that literally require, algorithmic processors just to manage the data.
Right, and we'll find out how acoustic pioneers centuries ago were basically inventing surround sound inside giant stone castles without a single drop of electricity.
Those are some of my favorite examples in the book.
Mine too. And then we will absolutely get into the mechanical reasons why the sonic dimensions of your favorite blockbuster movies or video games are like mathematically engineered to bypass your logic.
They directly manipulate your nervous system.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we even get into the timeline of the tech, we really have to establish the baseline of how human perception works.
We do. The text makes this really foundational argument right up front. We need to understand exactly how and why you listen to a sound in the very first place.
Right, the intent behind the listening.
Exactly. Because the reality is, your brain processes sound in totally different modes depending on what your objective is at that moment. The authors draw this very distinct, hard line between two specific modes.
Which are?
Listening to inform versus listening to entertain.
Okay, so we're talking about entirely different cognitive states.
Precisely.
Like if I am in my kitchen, right, and I have this tiny little radio on the counter, and I'm just trying to hear the morning traffic report or the weather, that would be listening to inform.
Yes, that is pure information gathering.
I mean, I really don't care if the radio announcer's voice has this lush, three-dimensional reverberation to it. I don't need to feel like he's standing in the room with me.
No, you just need basic intelligibility.
Right. I need the consonants and vowels to be clear enough that my brain can just decode the raw data. I could be walking across the kitchen, chopping vegetables, running the faucet.
And as long as you get the data, the audio system has done its job perfectly. For the purpose of information, the spatial construction of the sound is completely irrelevant.
Makes sense.
A single point source, like a mono speaker, is highly efficient for that. Your auditory attention is focused purely on semantic decoding.
But then the moment I decide to sit down on my couch, turn off the lights, and put on, say, a sweeping cinematic epic or a live concert recording.
Your entire cognitive demand shifts.
Yeah.
You are no longer just looking for raw data. You are actively seeking deep auditory emotion. You want a sense of place.
Total immersion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the book has a really fantastic metaphor for this transition that I think clarifies things beautifully.
Oh, the window analogy. I love that part.
Yeah, why don't you explain that one?
Sure. So they describe listening to standard stereo audio, so just two speakers, a left and a right, as essentially looking at a beautiful landscape, but you're looking at it through a window in your house. You can see there's a world out there. You perceive its left and right boundaries. It's a really nice view. But you are distinctly, constantly aware that you are inside your house and the view is outside.
The glass is a barrier.
Exactly. The glass separates you. But multi-channel sound, surround sound, is the actual act of stepping through that window frame and standing directly in the field.
You cross the threshold.
Yeah. Suddenly the wind is behind you, the birds are above you. You transition from being a passive observer who is just looking at a diorama into an active participant who is residing inside the environment.
It is a profound psychological leap.
Yeah.
And the text spends a considerable amount of time breaking down the actual mechanical benefits of making that leap through the window.
Because it's easy to just write it off, right?
Oh, entirely. It's very easy to dismiss surround sound as just a cynical marketing tactic by electronics companies.
Yeah.
They just want to sell us 5 speakers instead of 2.
Right, just more boxes in the living room.
But the authors argue it fundamentally alters the psychoacoustics of the experience. It offers new realism, obviously, but more importantly, it gives creators entirely new possibilities for what they call writing a scene.
Okay, I want to pause on that exact phrase. Writing a scene with sound. What does that actually mean mechanically?
Well, it changes how you can construct the narrative.
Like, how does having more speakers physically change the way a scene is built? Let's use a tangible example here.
Okay, let's say we are watching a highly tense thriller.
Ooh, I love a good thriller.
Right, and 2 characters are having this very quiet, intense conversation, but they're sitting at a table right in the middle of a chaotic, loud, incredibly crowded restaurant.
Perfect setup. So in a standard 2-speaker stereo setup, what is physically happening to that audio signal?
In stereo, you are forcing an enormous amount of sonic information through a very narrow pipe.
Just the left and right channels.
Exactly. You have the actors speaking their dialogue,
Yeah.
but you also have the sound of waiters dropping plates, other people talking, jazz music playing on the restaurant jukebox.
The hum of the air conditioner.
All of it. If you only have 2 speakers, all of those separate, distinct audio elements must be crammed into the left speaker cone and the right speaker cone. And this creates a severe acoustic traffic jam.
Which the book calls the masking effect, right?
The masking effect.
So because they're all sharing the exact same physical space, the same speaker cones, the frequencies literally crash into each other.
Yes, it is a strict physical limitation of sound waves. When multiple sounds occupy similar frequency ranges, and they are emitted from the exact same physical location, the louder or more complex sounds will literally mask or hide the quieter ones.
They just bury them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The human ear really struggles to separate them because there's no spatial separation to give the brain a clue.
It's just a wall of noise.
Right. So in that restaurant scene in stereo, the clinking plates and the background jazz will inevitably bleed right into the actors' voices. The dialogue loses its intelligibility.
Which forces the sound mixer to do what?
Well, they have to compromise. They have to artificially lower all the background noise to make the dialogue audible. But doing that completely ruins the realism of the crowded restaurant.
Man, this explains so much. It explains why, like, millions of people nowadays are constantly turning on the subtitles for movies on their TVs.
Oh, absolutely.
If they are just using the 2 tiny built-in speakers on their flat-screen TV, these massive, complex audio mixes are just collapsing into each other. The masking effect is burying the dialogue.
It's a massive problem in modern home viewing.
So how does stepping through the window, right, moving to a multi-channel 5.1 setup, how does that actually solve the masking effect?
It solves it through the allocation of physical space. In a standard 5.1 multi-channel system, you have a dedicated center channel speaker.
Which usually sits directly below or behind the TV screen.
Yes. So when the sound designer builds that same restaurant scene for 5.1, they can take the actor's dialogue and route it almost exclusively to that center speaker. They physically separate it from the rest of the noise.
Oh, so the dialogue gets its own dedicated lane on the highway.
Exactly. Because the dialogue is now emanating from a completely different physical point in the room than the background noise, the masking effect is drastically reduced.
You don't have to fight for space.
Right. The dialogue becomes pristine and highly intelligible because it practically owns that center space. Meanwhile, The sound designer takes the clinking glasses and the jazz music and pushes them out to the left and right front speakers.
And what about the people chattering in the background?
They take the ambient chatter of the patrons and route it to the surround speakers behind your head.
Wow.
So your brain can effortlessly focus on the dialogue because your ears tell it the voice is right in front of you while the environment wraps around you.
So spatial audio isn't just about, cool explosions behind my head. It's an actual tool for narrative clarity.
It is essential for clarity.
But speaking of explosions, there is a very specific component of the 5.1 setup that we haven't touched on yet. We have the 5 main speaker center, left, right, left surround, right surround, but then there is the point 1.
For subwoofer.
Right, the low frequency effect channel. And the text points out that this is where the audio experience stops being purely psychological and it becomes violently physical.
What's fascinating here is how the LFE channel is critical to understanding true immersion, because sound fundamentally is really just variations in air pressure.
Just pushing air.
Right. High-frequency sounds, like a whistle or a breaking glass, they have very short, rapid wavelengths. They are highly directional, and they interact primarily with the delicate little mechanisms inside your ear.
The eardrum, the tiny bones.
Yes. But low-frequency sounds, deep bass, anything below like 120 hertz, they have massive, incredibly long wavelengths. Some of these waves can literally be dozens of feet long.
And because the waves are so massive, they don't just stop at the eardrum, right?
Oh no, they pass right through objects. They pass right through the walls of the room, through the floorboards, through the wooden frame of your couch, and directly into the fluids and cavities of your human body.
That is wild.
The authors highlight that the LFE channel fundamentally alters the medium. When a massive spaceship flies overhead on screen, or, a dinosaur stomps its foot, the subwoofer generates a pressure wave that literally vibrates your chest cavity.
You physically feel it in your lungs.
Exactly. You're no longer just interpreting acoustic data with your ears. Your actual skeletal and nervous systems are physically interacting with the shock wave of a totally fictional event.
It's the ultimate biological hack. Like, you are sitting completely still in a comfortable, climate-controlled living room, but your chest is vibrating from the impact of an explosion that never actually happened.
It is an incredibly sophisticated illusion.
Your brain gets the clear dialogue from the center channel to anchor the story. The surround speakers wrap the ambient environment around your peripheral hearing. And then the subwoofer physically shakes your skeletal structure to simulate danger.
And the human brain, despite rationally knowing it is an illusion, just completely accepts this synthetic acoustic space as reality.
It's amazing. But what is truly remarkable, as the text reveals, is that humanity's desire to construct these immersive acoustic illusions. It didn't begin with the invention of the microchip or the subwoofer.
Not even close.
And this brings up a massive historical question, because we always associate all of this immersion with modern technology, right? Dolby, Atmos, digital processors. But did humans even conceptualize spatial audio before we had wires and electricity? Like, were people sitting around in the 1500s wishing they had surround sound?
They absolutely were, and they actually achieved it using the only technology they had available to them at the time, which was architecture in human bodies. The historical timeline presented in the text is just astonishing. Long before the concept of an electronic loudspeaker even existed, classical composers were treating physical space itself as a critical instrument in their compositions.
They were the original acoustic engineers.
They were. They were actually writing spatial coordinates directly into the sheet music.
So we have these, acoustic rebels. Who is the earliest example the book points to?
The text highlights this English composer named Thomas Tallis. The year is 1570.
1570, okay.
He composed a motet, which is a piece of choral music titled Spem in Allium. Now, what makes this piece legendary is its geometry. It is a 40-voice composition. But Tallis didn't just write for 40 people to stand shoulder to shoulder on a stage facing the audience.
Like a standard choir.
Right. He didn't do that. He wrote it for 8 entirely separate choirs, with 5 voices in each choir.
Wait, 8 separate choirs? Where do you even put them all?
They were specifically arranged in a circle. It was intended to be performed in an octagonal hall inside a castle, such as Nonsuch Palace.
Okay, let's just imagine the logistics of that for a second. You walk into this grand octagonal stone room in 1570, you stand in the dead center, and you literally have human voices hitting you from the north, south, east, west, and all the diagonal points in between.
A total 360-degree sound field.
The sound waves are traveling across the room, bouncing off the hard stone walls, creating these natural reverberations that just crash into each other. Tallis essentially built an organic 8-channel surround sound system using human beings.
He absolutely did. And the text moves forward just 15 years to 1585 to a composer named Giovanni Gabrieli.
Okay, what did Gabrieli do?
He was working in St. Mark's Basilica in Venice.
Hmm.
Now, St. Mark's is this enormous cavernous space, and it has very specific architecture, including 2 opposing choir lofts that face each other directly across the main space of the church.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Gabrieli looked at those opposing balconies and realized they were essentially a massive left and right speaker system. He invented a style called polychoral music. He specifically wrote pieces where a choir on the left balcony would sing a phrase, and then the choir on the right balcony would respond.
Throwing the sound back and forth.
Exactly, throwing it across the physical void of the basilica.
But hold on, I have to challenge the mechanics of this. I enthusiastically interrupt because how on earth do you coordinate this?
It's a great question.
Like, how do you keep 2 groups of singers separated by a massive chasm in a highly reverberant stone church, perfectly in time with each other? Today, if a pop star is singing at one end of a stadium, the band is at the other, they all wear perfectly synced digital in-ear monitors playing a click track.
Right. Modern tech makes it easy.
Without digital monitors, wouldn't the natural delay of the sound traveling across the church completely ruin the tempo? The left choir would hear the right choir a half-second too late.
And that is exactly the genius of what Gabrieli was doing. He wasn't ignoring the acoustic delay, he was composing for it.
Wait, really?
Yes. He understood the speed of sound. He utilized a primary conductor who was visible to both balconies, relying heavily on line-of-sight visual cues rather than auditory cues to maintain tempo.
Oh, so they watched. They didn't just listen.
Right. The natural delay and the massive decay of the reverb inside St. Mark's weren't flaws to be overcome, they were actual features of the composition. He was painting with time and space.
It's just staggering to think about the intuition required to pull that off in 1585.
It truly is.
And then the book jumps forward to the Romantic era and introduces someone who pushed this even further into, like, theatrical manipulation. Hector Berlioz.
Yes, Berlioz in the 1830s took spatial manipulation from mere geometry into the realm of actual psychological trickery. The text references his iconic Symphonie Fantastique, which he composed in 1830. In the third movement, which depicts a scene in the country, Berlioz requires an oboe player, but he specifically instructs in the score that the oboe player must be positioned completely off stage.
Wait, so they are physically removed from the concert hall?
Yes, they have to play from behind a wall or a closed door.
Why kick the musician out of the room? What is the psychoacoustic goal there?
To artificially simulate vast distance.
Oh.
By placing the instrument behind a physical obstruction, the sound waves are altered. The higher frequencies get absorbed by the architecture, so only the muffled lower frequencies actually reach the audience, and they arrive enveloped in a completely different set of reverberations.
So they sound far away.
Exactly. When the audience's brain processes this muffled, delayed sound, it automatically concludes that the instrument must be incredibly far away. Berlioz was tricking the audience's auditory cortex into imagining a vast, sprawling pastoral landscape extending miles beyond the physical walls of the concert hall.
He's using acoustic muffling to force the brain to render a massive landscape. It's virtual reality in 1830.
It really is.
And didn't he escalate this even further a few years later?
Considerably further. For his Requiem in 1837, Berlioz practically demanded the impossible. Alongside the massive main orchestra and choir in the front, he required 4 additional, entirely separate brass ensembles.
4 more.
Yes. And he positioned these 4 ensembles at the 4 corners of the venue, north, south, east, and west. It was a completely enveloping, aggressive manipulation of space.
So if we look at Tallis, Gabrieli, and Berlioz, we see a clear, undeniable desire to break out of the flat mono experience. They wanted the sound to surround the listener, to travel, to imply spaces that weren't there.
The ambition was always there.
But they hit a hard physical limit, right? I mean, you can only hire so many human musicians. You can only build so many stone balconies. So how did this desire translate when we finally harnessed electricity and could actually synthesize sound?
Well, once electronics entered the equation in the 20th century, The physical limits of human musicians basically vanished. The text points to a true visionary of this transition, Edgar Varese.
Edgar Varese.
Varese fundamentally believed that the future of music wasn't just about melody and rhythm, it was about movement. He famously declared, "The music of tomorrow will be spatial."
He saw it coming.
He envisions sound as a physical mass, describing trajectories and arcs moving through three-dimensional space.
But he didn't just write theoretical papers about it, he actually built it. The book details what he did at the Brussels World's Fair in 1958.
Yes, the Philips Pavilion at the 1958 World's Fair. The pavilion itself was this architectural marvel. Designed by Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis, it featured sweeping, asymmetrical, hyperbolic curves.
Very futuristic.
Extremely. And Varese composed a piece of electronic music specifically for this space called Poème électronique. Now, to realize his vision of moving sound, the engineers routed the audio through a staggering network of over 400 loudspeakers.
400 speakers.
And they were embedded directly into the interior walls of the pavilion.
400 speakers in 1958. I mean, that is a logistical nightmare even today.
It was an unprecedented matrix. As the audience walked through the pavilion, the sound would literally swirl around them, panning smoothly across hundreds of discrete points, rising to the ceiling, plunging to the floor. It was the first true, large-scale realization of synthetic spatial audio.
Wow. And this massive success in 1958 proved that electronic spatialization wasn't just a gimmick, it was a legitimate art form.
It kicked off a whole movement.
Which led to the creation of institutions dedicated to studying this, like the GRM in France, the Groupe de Recherche Musicale, and the GRM is responsible for inventing what might be the craziest piece of audio hardware I had ever heard of.
Oh, the Acosmonium.
Yes, the text calls it the Acosmonium, created in 1974 by François Bayle. What exactly is an Acosmonium?
The best way to visualize the Acosmonium is to think of it as an orchestra of loudspeakers.
Okay, I'm trying to picture that.
Imagine walking into a grand concert hall. You sit down, but when the curtain rises, there are absolutely no human musicians on the stage. Instead, the stage, the wings, and even the seating area around you are filled with roughly 80 individual loudspeakers.
80 speakers just sitting there.
But they aren't uniform. They are all completely different shapes, sizes, and brands. You have massive subwoofer cabinets on the floor, tall mid-range towers, and tiny, delicate tweeters suspended in the air.
Okay, so it's a forest of mismatched speakers. But how is it performed? Does someone just walk out, press play on a tape deck, and walk away?
Not at all. It is a highly active, live performance. The composer, or an interpreter, sits at an enormous analog mixing console situated right in the middle of the audience.
Like a sound guy at a rock concert?
Basically. They play a source track, which in 1974 was often just a high-quality, two-channel stereo tape of electronic music. But as the tape plays, the performer uses the sliders on the console to dynamically route the audio to the different speakers in real time.
So they are actively steering the sound around the room while it's playing?
Yes. But they are doing it based on the physical properties of the sound itself.
What do you mean?
If a deep, rumbling, thunderous sound occurs on the tape, the performer will quickly route that signal to the massive bass cabinets grouped on the floor, giving it immense weight. If a high, sparkling, chaotic sound follows, they might route it to a cluster of tiny, sharp tweeters suspended high up in the rafters.
Oh, that's brilliant.
They are playing the acoustic properties of the room and the unique tonal color of each individual speaker. They are spatializing the music live.
So the avant-garde classical world and the electronic pioneers clearly proved that manipulating acoustic space was this profound emotional art form. They pushed the absolute boundaries of what was physically and electronically possible.
They laid all the groundwork.
But as we see throughout history, avant-garde art rarely reaches the average person. It took a totally different industry, one driven by profit and mass appeal, to take these wild, chaotic experiments, standardize them, put them in a digestible box, and ship them to the world.
We are, of course, talking about Hollywood.
Yes, the cinematic arms race, how Hollywood weaponized sound. The evolution of cinema sound, as detailed in the text, is a fascinating study in technological acceleration that was driven almost entirely by economic panic.
Economic panic is a great way to put it.
Right. It wasn't just artistic vision, it was survival. But before we get to the panic, the book does mention that Hollywood flirted with spatial sound early on. Disney, in 1940, with the movie Fantasia.
Yes, Walt Disney was incredibly ambitious. For Fantasia, the studio developed a proprietary system called Fantasound.
Fantasound.
They recorded the orchestra using multiple discrete channels and then installed a highly complex playback system in select theaters, placing speakers not just behind the screen but around the back of the auditorium. It was a 3-channel surround system decades ahead of its time.
So if it was that good, why didn't every movie after 1940 have surround sound?
Pure economics, compounded by the outbreak of World War II.
Bad timing.
The Fantasound equipment required massive amounts of materials, specifically amplifiers, which were incredibly heavy and expensive back then. The installation cost for a single theater was astronomical. When the war started, rationing made the equipment basically impossible to produce, and the system was scrapped. The industry reverted to simple mono sound.
It was a false start. But then, a decade later, the true catalyst arrives. The thing that set Hollywood on fire in the 1950s, the invention of the television.
The post-war boom of the television was an existential threat to the movie theater. Suddenly, families could sit in their living rooms and watch moving pictures for free.
Why pay for a ticket?
Exactly. Cinema attendance plummeted dramatically. The major studios realized that to survive, they had to offer an experience that a tiny black and white box with a 2-inch speaker simply could not match. They couldn't just offer a movie, they had to offer a spectacle.
So they had to go bigger in every possible dimension. Visually, we got the massive widescreen formats. But acoustically, this is when spatial sound stops being an experiment and becomes a literal weapon to drag people out of their houses.
Exactly. The 1950s saw an explosion of massive magnetic audio formats attached to these widescreen visual spectacles. You had Cinerama, which utilized a staggering 7 magnetic audio tracks on a separate piece of film running parallel to the picture.
7 tracks.
You had Todd A.O. and the famous CinemaScope, which standardized a 4-channel magnetic system, left, center, right, and a single surround channel that fed speakers placed along the walls of the theater.
So we have the sound wrapping around the walls, but when did we get the rumble? We talked earlier about the LFE, the subwoofer, physically shaking the audience. When did Hollywood decide to start vibrating the human skeleton?
The book pinpoints the exact year and the exact movie.
Here's where it gets really interesting. 1974, the movie is called Earthquake.
A movie title that serves as a literal description of its acoustic goal.
Right. For Earthquake, they developed this specialized audio process called Sensurround. And what's fascinating is that Sensurround wasn't designed to deliver high-fidelity orchestral music. Its sole purpose was to generate fear.
It was an application of pure acoustic force. Universal Studios worked with engineers to build massive, custom-designed, low-frequency speaker cabinets.
How big are we talking?
Enormous wooden bins packed with giant drivers. They were installed temporarily at the front and back of the participating theaters. During specific scenes in the movie, when the earthquake hit, a control track on the film would trigger these massive amplifiers.
And what did they do?
They generated intense, low-frequency rumble, specifically hitting frequencies that resonate with human chest cavities and the physical structure of the building. The goal was to make the audience feel like the ceiling of the theater was about to literally collapse on them.
It was an amusement park ride. But, I mean, having to haul giant wooden cabinets into a theater just for one movie isn't a sustainable business model. The industry needed a robust, standardized, permanent solution that didn't require customized magnetic film prints for every single showing.
They needed a system that just worked everywhere.
And the text explains that this savior arrived in 1976. Dolby Stereo. And this brings us to a piece of engineering that I need you to break down for me because it sounds like witchcraft. The 424 matrix.
The Dolby Stereo 424 matrix is truly one of the most elegant solutions in audio engineering history.
Okay, set the stage for me.
The problem the industry faced was backward compatibility. CinemaScope's magnetic tracks degraded quickly and were expensive to print. Most cinemas in the world still used old, reliable optical audio tracks.
Optical tracks, that's literally a photographic waveform printed right on the edge of the physical film strip. Right?
Exactly. A little squiggly line of light and dark. But there's only enough physical room on the film strip for 2 optical tracks, a left and a right.
It's just a standard stereo pair.
Right. So how do you provide 4 channels of immersive audio left, center, right, and surround if you only have a 2-channel delivery pipe?
It sounds impossible. You can't put 4 gallons of water in a 2-gallon bucket.
You do it by mathematically folding the sound into itself using a principle called phase manipulation.
Okay, phase manipulation. Let's explore the physics of phase.
Sound travels in waves, peaks and valleys of air pressure. If you take 2 identical sound waves and play them at the exact same time, their peaks align and the sound gets louder, This is constructive interference.
Makes sense.
But if you take one of those waves and delay it by exactly half a wavelength, so its peak perfectly aligns with the value of the other wave, they destroy each other. The sound cancels out to zero. This is destructive interference.
Okay, so phase is basically just the timing alignment of the peaks and valleys. How does Dolby use that to hide audio?
The Dolby engineers built an encoder. The sound mixer creates 4 discrete tracks: left, center, right, and surround. The encoder takes the audio from the center track and splits it equally into the left and right delivery tracks, keeping the phase perfectly aligned.
Okay, so center goes into both, perfectly matched.
Then it takes the surround track, splits it into the left and right tracks, but intentionally shifts the phase of the signal going to the left track by 180 degrees.
It flips it upside down.
Yes. It mathematically encodes this phase-shifted information directly into the standard stereo tracks.
So on the physical reel of film that ships to the theater, there are only 2 tracks of audio. It's just a standard stereo print.
Yes. If a cheap rural theater plays that film, they just hear a stereo movie. The phase trickery doesn't bother them. It's completely backward compatible.
Okay.
But if a premium theater installs a Dolby stereo decoder, the magic happens. The electronic decoder reads the incoming left and right tracks and constantly analyzes the phase relationship between them.
It's looking for the hidden signals.
Exactly. When it detects audio that is perfectly in phase in both the left and right channels, its logic circuits say, aha, that's the center channel information. It extracts that sound, removes it from the left and right, and steers it to the center speaker.
That handles the dialogue. And what about the surround channel?
When the decoder detects audio that is perfectly out of phase between the left and right channels, remember, the encoder flipped it upside down. It instantly recognizes the signature. It extracts that sound and steers it to the surround speakers at the back of the room.
Wow.
It takes 4 channels of audio, folds them down into 2 for transportation, and then unpacks them back into 4 upon delivery. 424.
An acoustic magic trick encoded directly onto the celluloid. That is brilliant. And it was a massive success. And then, as the text notes, just 1 year later, in 1977, a specific movie came along that fundamentally cemented the modern theater layout: Star Wars.
Star Wars utilized the Dolby Matrix, but the audio engineers, including the legendary Ben Burtt, realized that standard theater speakers just couldn't handle the dynamic range of science fiction.
Right, spaceships aren't flutes.
Exactly. The massive roar of the Star Destroyers flying overhead was physically distorting the main speakers. They needed a dedicated channel solely to handle that massive, air-moving low end.
Enter the LFE again.
Yes. They formalized what was then called the baby boom channel, which was routed to dedicated subwoofers. This created the modern foundation: left, center, right, a mono surround channel, and the LFE.
But this was all still analog, right? It was optical film.
Yeah.
As we move into the 1990s, the book takes us through the digital explosion, and this is a wild era of competing formats trying to cram digital code onto physical film.
The transition to digital audio in the cinema was an incredible logistical challenge, because you couldn't just erase the analog tracks,
Why not?
because 80% of theaters still relied on them. If you removed the analog tracks, the movie would be silent in most towns.
Yeah.
You had to find microscopic, unused real estate on the physical 35mm film strip to print digital data.
I've seen a strip of 35mm film. Between the visual picture frame and the analog audio track, there is almost zero blank space. Where did they possibly put the digital code?
They looked at the physical perforations.
The sprocket holes.
Yes, the little sprocket holes on the edge of the film that the gears use to pull the film to the projector. In 1992, for the movie Batman Returns, Dolby introduced Dolby Digital, which at the time was called SRD. They physically printed microscopic blocks of digital data in the tiny webs of plastic between the sprocket holes.
They put the data between the gear holes. That is insane engineering.
It was brilliant. It provided 6 entirely discrete digital channels: left, center, right surround, and the subwoofer, 5.1. Unlike the matrix system we just talked about, these channels didn't share information. They were completely independent files, offering pristine digital separation.
But they weren't the only ones trying to solve this. The format war heated up immediately. The very next year, 1993, Steven Spielberg releases Jurassic Park, and it introduces a rival format: DTS.
DTS took a completely different approach.
Yeah.
They realized that printing complex digital data between the sprocket holes was risky. If the film got dirty or scratched by the gears, the audio would drop out.
Fair point.
So DTS didn't put the audio on the film at all. They printed a simple, robust optical timecode on the edge of the film. When the film ran through the projector, A laser read the timecode and sent a synchronization signal to a completely separate CD-ROM player sitting in the projection booth.
So the audio was on a CD.
Yes, the CD-ROM held a high-quality, discrete 5.1 digital audio perfectly synced to the picture by the timecode.
And Sony wasn't going to let Dolby and DTS have all the fun. That same year, 1993, with the movie Last Action Hero, they introduced SDDS, and they decided to cram even more channels onto the film.
Sony's SDDS pushed the standard to 7.1 channels. They added 2 extra front speakers, left center and right center, to create a massive, seamless wall of sound behind the screen.
And where did they put their data?
On the extreme, absolute outer edges of the film strip, outside the sprocket holes entirely.
So
For a few years in the 90s, a major Hollywood film print would have the Dolby analog track, the Dolby digital track between the holes, the DTS timecode, and the Sony digital track on the edges. Every single millimeter of the celluloid was packed with audio formats.
this digital standard 5.1 and 7.1 held the line for nearly 20 years. It became the bedrock of modern cinema. But then, as the text outlines, history repeated itself. Just like the threat of television in the 50s forced audio to expand, a new visual evolution occurred in the late 2000s that forced audio to evolve again.
The visual anchor shifted once again.
Right. The late 2000s saw the massive resurgence of stereoscopic 3D movies, spearheaded largely by James Cameron's Avatar.
Exactly. Suddenly, the screen wasn't a flat window anymore. The visuals were leaping off the screen into the theater or receding deep into the wall. The visual field gained a profound Z-axis depth.
And when the visual field gained a Z-axis, the audio field suddenly felt inadequate.
It did. 5.1 and 7.1 systems create a flat ring of sound around the listener's head. It's a two-dimensional circle. When audiences were watching characters fly through three-dimensional space on screen, the flat circle of sound broke the illusion.
The brain knew something was wrong.
The industry realized that to maintain cognitive immersion, the sound needed a third dimension as well. It needed height. Sound had to come from directly overhead.
And this leads us to the modern titans of cinema audio. In 2012, with the release of the Pixar movie Brave, we see the debut of Dolby Atmos. And Atmos isn't just adding 1 or 2 ceiling speakers.
No, Dolby Atmos is a total paradigm shift. It allows for up to 64 independent, discrete speakers in a single cinema auditorium.
64 speakers.
This includes massive arrays of speakers bolted directly to the ceiling above the audience, as well as additional speakers placed lower on the side walls to create a complete hemisphere of sound.
And what about the competitors?
Rival systems like Auro 3D approach this by creating multiple distinct layers of sound. They have a standard ear level layer, a height layer, and then a single voice of God speaker placed at the very apex of the ceiling.
So, after nearly a century of iteration, Hollywood had perfected the acoustic temple. They had completely surrounded the audience on the X, Y, and Z axes. The theater was mathematically perfect.
It was an engineering triumph.
But naturally, the consumer electronics industry looked at that multi-million-dollar temple and said, how do we cram this into an average suburban living room?
Of course they did.
And according to the historical analysis in the text, the initial attempt to do this was an unmitigated, spectacular failure.
It is a textbook example of engineering ambition, completely ignoring consumer psychology and interior design.
The living room wars.
The first massive push to bring surround sound into the home didn't actually happen with movies. It happened with the music industry in the late 1960s and 1970s. It was a format known as quadraphonic sound, or 4.0.